So today we begin a new liturgical season, the season of creation. And here at MCC Toronto, we've been doing this for a few years now. And the season of creation is a relatively new thing in the church worldwide. And I think it's a wonderful evolution, wonderful development in our consciousness about and our spiritual relationship with all creation. And the origins of the liturgical calendar, this is the boring part of the sermon, you can nap. The liturgical calendar can be traced back to the Hebrew Scriptures, where the Jewish religious year was based on the feasts and seasons set forth in the Law of Moses. And a lot of those feasts and seasons were tied to the seasons of the earth and the agricultural realities that shaped the wheel of the year. Then in the Christian period, the structure of the liturgical calendar focuses more on the life of Jesus, and so we get things like Advent, the preparation for the birth of Jesus at Christmas, and Lent, where we look to Jesus' ministry and the period leading up to his death and resurrection in Easter. And interestingly, to me at least, maybe not so much to you, much of the Christian calendar actually has its roots in that ancient Jewish calendar, in that, for instance, the dating of Easter is based on the date of Passover, and Pentecost is actually based on the Feast of Weeks, which is a principal feast in Judaism. And there's a lot that we have in common if we think about it. And those of us who've been around church or churches for a long time may have some passing familiarity with the liturgical calendar, you know? Okay, we're used to Lent, we've heard of Advent. Actually, growing up in the Baptist church, I never even heard of Advent until I was in high school. And it came as kind of a pleasant surprise to me because I do love me some purple. But now everything's orange. And what's all that about? You know, part of it is that orange is the color for season of creation, and part of it, as many of you know, is because tomorrow is the day for truth and reconciliation. But the season of creation is a time that's celebrated in many Christian communities in the fall because, you know, fall seems like a good time for us to reflect on and deepen our relationship with the earth and recognize our role as stewards of God's creation. Okay, the boring part's over. Now start paying attention. Thank you. And this morning we reflect on a profound truth. The land is sacred. All of the land. All over the earth. And sometimes I hear people say, I wish I could travel to the Holy Land. Dude, the land you're standing on is holy. God made all of it. We made none of it. Humans did not make the land. And if you read Genesis, you find that actually humans are made from the land. There's an old joke, and I'm an old jokester, so I'm going to tell it. And it seems that God and the devil were arguing one day, and the devil says, I can create life just as well as you can. So God goes down to earth, fashions a human being out of the dirt, breathes life into it, and then says, there, top that. So the devil goes down to earth and picks up a handful of mud, and God wags the divine finger and says, first you make your own dirt. And we laugh, politely. But the joke kind of illustrates the intimate connection between us and the land and the divine. So we are the earth, and the earth is us. And as we often say at burials, we are dust, and to dust we return. And God has woven the earth and us with divine beauty and purpose. I love that hymn we sang, For the Beauty of the Earth, and how we reflect on all that is beautiful. And we are called to honor this sacred relationship. And I am painfully aware that we have not always done a very good job with this. Right? Right. Are any of y'all familiar with the comic strip Calvin and Hobbes? Cool. A little 5-year-old boy and his stuffed tiger who comes to life when there are no grown-ups around. Well, Calvin and Hobbes are playing in the forest, and Calvin muses, We seem to understand the value of oil, timber, minerals, and housing, but not the value of unspoiled beauty, wildlife, solitude, and spiritual renewal. Out of the mouths of babes, eh? The earth is not just a resource, but a sacred trust. The whole earth and all that's in it is an incredible gift to us. And it would be good if we didn't squander it. It would be even better if we hadn't been squandering it for centuries. But there's no time like the present to do better. As the late great poet and activist Maya Angelou said, when we know better, we can do better. And what might doing better look like in the here and now? I got a couple thoughts. One, we might better reflect on the notion that the land that we live and work and play on is both a gift and a responsibility. In Genesis, we're told that the first humans were placed in a beautiful garden, a place that had everything necessary for human life to thrive and flourish. And they were placed there in order to keep it and till it, and not, frankly, to rape and abuse it. The land has everything we need, but we're not to treat it as simply a resource for human consumption. And the notion of keeping and caring for the land inherent in Genesis is a call to balance our use of the earth with care and reverence, ensuring that the land remains a place of life for all creatures, human and otherwise. Two, expanding a little on that notion of reverence for the land, we need to understand that in the earliest descriptions of our faith, as expressed in the Hebrew Scriptures, the land has held deep spiritual significance. In the Law of Moses, we're told that the land must never be sold permanently because the land is mine, i.e., the land belongs to God for all time. And God says, you reside in my land as foreigners and strangers. And the Israelites were taught that the land was not something to own permanently, but to respect. And God's laws, such as the Sabbath and Jubilee years, ensured that the land rested and was cared for and remained fruitful. And this understanding of land as sacred completely disrupts the modern view that treats the earth as a commodity. Instead, we're reminded the land belongs to God, and our actions should reflect our reverence for God and for God's creation. And third, I will suggest that the failure to treat the land and the people of the land as sacred isn't just a practical crisis, isn't just a scientific problem, but it is also an existential crisis and even a spiritual crisis. And we don't have to look far to see the consequences of failing to treat the land as sacred. Deforestation, climate change, soil degradation, pollution, even extinction. The recent storms down in the southeastern United States are arguably a consequence of our abuse of the world. And I'm not trying to make a political point here. The environmental crisis is not just a scientific or political issue, it is a spiritual one. This affects all of us at the deepest core of our spirits. When we exploit the land, we are dishonoring the Creator. We're told in Paul's letter to the Romans that all creation groans waiting for liberation, and our earth is groaning under the weight of human greed and neglect. And the land, along with all creation, is waiting for humanity to return to our God-given role as stewards. And this includes recognizing and honoring indigenous wisdom about the land. So I think we need to ask ourselves, how can we restore the sacredness of the land in our lives? You know, it's funny, I love to garden, and I love to get my hands and arms and feet into the dirt. And I feel, if you'll pardon the word, grounded when I do that. And there's a reason for that. It's something spiritually significant to me. And as people of faith, we are called to reconcile not just with each other, but with all of creation. And this includes advocating for justice for the earth and its people, especially with indigenous communities who have long viewed the land as sacred. You know, indigenous peoples often speak of the land as a relative, a sacred part of their spiritual lives. When indigenous people speak of all my relations, when the choir sang, all my relations come, we are one. When indigenous peoples speak of all my relations, they don't just mean their extended families, they mean also the animals and birds and reptiles and fish and the very land itself, to which we are all kin. We are related. They are our family. And that beautiful relationship has been harmed and nearly destroyed by colonization. And indigenous wisdom reminds us that to harm the land is to harm what we most love and to harm ourselves. And on this day, when we're about to celebrate a national day for truth and reconciliation, we should be especially mindful of this. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation provides an opportunity for us to both reflect on the sacredness of creation and on the need for justice and healing in our relationships with indigenous peoples and the land, to reflect on both environmental stewardship and the historical injustices related to colonization, and especially the suffering caused by residential schools and land dispossession. And this day calls us to remember the painful legacy of residential schools, to honor the survivors, and commit ourselves to the ongoing process of reconciliation between indigenous and settler peoples. We can't lose sight of the fact that colonization brought widespread exploitation of both the land and the people of the land. This is true. And the forced removal of indigenous children to residential schools and the loss of land disrupted indigenous cultures and ways of life. And that painful history has left deep scars on both the people and the land. We can see that. And we have to acknowledge that the legacy of colonization has contributed to environmental degradation and the breaking of those sacred relationships between indigenous peoples and the land. And it prevents us from being in that sacred relationship with one another and the land as well. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation calls us to confront the truth of past injustices and to seek healing. Truth-telling is a spiritual act because it acknowledges the wounds of the past and it makes space for healing. Reconciliation is a spiritual imperative. And as a community of faith, we need to be about the task of reconciliation in all of the ways in which is crucial. God says God will reconcile all things to God's self, so we need to participate with God in that process. And reconciliation requires action. It requires us to demonstrate a new way of being in relationship, to stand with our indigenous siblings when they stand up for the land and the water, and to declare and affirm their sovereign rights to land and community and culture and spirituality. And I think we can start by reclaiming the idea that the land, all land, is a sacred and holy thing. And in recognizing the land as sacred, we become part of the healing of creation. We can restore our broken relationship with the earth by embracing sustainable living, protecting natural habitats, raising awareness of ecological issues, raising awareness of justice issues. And as we reflect on the land as sacred, let us embrace our role as stewards of creation and agents of reconciliation. The work of healing is long. Sometimes it's hard, but it is sacred work that we can all engage in. And in doing so, we honor both the Creator and the land that sustains us all. Amen.